Welcome back to our next fireside chat here at the North American Supply Chain Summit. With me today, we're going to be talking about sustainability with AB InBev and Angie Slaughter here, the VP of Sustainability, Logistics, and Capabilities Procurement. I believe I got your title right at AB InBev, and she's been there for 20 years working on the supply chain side. How are you doing today, Angie?
Doing great. Fabulous. Thanks for having us.
Great. Can you go more into kind of your background, your experience with sustainability with AB InBev?
Yeah, certainly. So I kind of grew up in the company. I've been here going on 22 years, started with the operations, really worked a lot in my past on conservation specifically, and then came into procurement in 2011. And we actually have responsibility for procurement and sustainability for our entire North American zone of AB InBev globally.
Perfect. So when we talk about sustainability in the supply chain, it kind of encompasses several different facets usually, right? It's kind of an abstract term that covers a lot of different things. So when we talk about sustainability, or when you talk about sustainability, what exactly can we define that for our audience right now?
Yeah, when I think about it, it is a holistic view of environmental, social, and economic aspects of our supply chain. I would think of it from end to end. We like to sometimes refer to this as from seed to sip, all the way from the grain that goes into our agricultural products, all the way to the responsible consumption and sip of our beers at the consumer level. And when you think about it, beer is a very natural product, so it makes perfect sense that we would have goals aligned to our natural resources like water and like agriculture that are so important to have high quality ingredients to make our fantastic beers.
Yeah, I always think of it as carbon emissions. I think a lot of people do sustainability. That's kind of the most used form of that. Can you give an example of kind of like agriculture or something in procurement or transportation that isn't carbon emissions but something else?
Absolutely. We have four major pillar goals. When I talk about sustainability, we have four public commitments by 2025, and I can kind of step through those. The first of which is water stewardship. So we are committed to 100% of our watersheds, our high-risk watersheds, having measurable improved quantity and quality of water. So it goes beyond just our own water conservation and actually into the entire watershed that serves the community and improving that. The second one is around agriculture, as we mentioned. We're a large user of agricultural commodities, but here we want 100% of our direct farmers in the US and around the world to be highly skilled, connected, and financially empowered, and we can talk about what that means in a bit, but we work with about 1,000 growers here in the US, just to put it in perspective. The third area is packaging, and we can talk about that one also. But here we want 100% of our primary materials, and that would be aluminum and glass, to be majority recycled content or returnable. And as you know, the US is not really a returnable bottle market today per se, but we would love to change that. And then the last one is around renewables and carbon, which is more closely linked to the transportation space for us. But here we want 100% of our purchased electricity to be from renewables. And we have a goal to reduce 25% of our carbon emissions across our entire value chain. So end to end, not just our own operations, but throughout our supply chain. So those are the four main areas that we think about when we talk about sustainability. And it's really where we as a company have the most impact and have size and scale to drive real meaningful change.
Yeah, Angie, those are all perfect examples of sustainability in the supply chain. Let's dissect the supply chain or break it up into its unique parts and talk about sustainability in each of those major segments. And let's go upstream right now into procurement of raw materials and talk a little bit about that. We touched on it a little bit with agriculture and water, but let's dive into it a little bit deeper.
Yeah, sure. Like I mentioned, we work with 1,000 growers here in the U.S. Those are direct growers that we contract with annually. To put it in context, we buy about 30 million bushels of barley a year, about 17 million bushels of rice, and 3.5 million million pounds of hops every year. So just to kind of round out the volumes that we're talking about. But with our growers, again, we want them to be highly skilled, connected, and financially empowered. And our overarching program to do that is called Smart Barley. And it's essentially a data platform. It's a networking platform where we can benchmark inputs at the grower level and actually drive improvement in productivity while also reducing the use of natural resources.
So are those benchmarks, are those for the growers to go in and check their metrics or their KPIs with the entire group of growers out there, maybe in their niche or product line, and be able to give them tools to increase their efficiencies as well?
Exactly, spot on. So they can go in, it's a benchmarking tool. And it's not only here in the US, it's connected globally. So if we have similar growing regions, similar climates around the world, they can benchmark there as well. But it's inputs like water use and fertilizer use or nitrogen to also look at on a one-to-one basis so that they can actually improve their own operation, increase productivity, increase their own profitability, and overall our quality stays the same and our impact on natural resources goes down.
It certainly does. So making your growers more efficient. I mean, I'm sure you have quite a few success stories on that, and how growers have used benchmarking to increase their yields and really become more sustainable themselves, right? But besides the maybe soil quality, but their actual business, their farming business of sustainability. How about if we come down to, packaging's a very important aspect of any CPG, any food and beverage company that packages, for say beer and other drinks. It's very important, and it's a huge a piece of the business and cost that goes into producing each bottle or can of beer is certainly the packaging. How about sustainability in the packaging part of the supply chain?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned here, our ultimate goal is to increase recycled content or potentially get to a returnable type space in our market or in our industry. When we think about recycled content, aluminum is highly recycled today. We're about 70% recycled content there. Glass is where we struggle a little bit more. We're about 35% recycled content there. But there's just more stress and strain, I would say, on the glass recycled market in general, getting those recycled cullet glass streams back to our manufacturing facilities proves to be more of a challenge through the recycling system. One example here that I want to bring is an announcement that we had earlier this year and how we innovate with our suppliers and our supply chain. It was an announcement with Rio Tinto, and it was for a low carbon aluminum. So when you think about the fact that I just said we have 70% recycled content when you think of a normal aluminum 12-ounce beer can, what happens with that other 30% that we're bringing in? Like typically, or conventionally, you would be bringing in a virgin material on. We now have line of sight in the future working with Rio Tinto to a low carbon aluminum pathway. And they've really done this through a disruptive technology in the smelting process to bring down the carbon impact of that aluminum. So that's just one example of how we've been able to innovate in our supply chain and think about how do we change the materials also to bring down our impact and our carbon emissions.
So I guess a lot of the 30% or the 70% that's not recycled has to do with the material and not per se the behavior of people recycling. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think we can always do better, and this is where one of our aspirations to continue to work with our consumers to incentivize behavior on the back end, that end of life with our products, and what happens then once it's in the marketplace. How do we make sure that we engage our consumers to recycle as much as possible and get those streams back into our raw material streams and our protection facilities?
Yeah, and that goes back to the glass bottles, right? And the U.S. is not really a glass bottle recycling place, and I don't know if that is because of behavior or materials, or is it a combination of both, just like aluminum?
I think at one time it was normal, right, in the U.S. if you go back in time, And I'd also like to highlight a pilot we have going on right now in the state of California. It's with a company through our accelerator program called Conscious Container. And we are actually bringing a recycled bottle to market for a 12-week pilot, I believe. It's 12 weeks, with two of our brands, Elysian Space Dust and Michelob Ultra Pure Gold. And so we're actually trialing this, and we're engaging consumers in an interactive way with some QR codes to really understand what are the behavior patterns, do the consumers want this, and how do we drive this to be forward in our industry.
Yeah, California is a very good place to start a program like that. I'm in California right now, and they take recycling very seriously. We're recycling our bottles right now out here at my sister's place, so it's a good place to start in any program. Certainly, let's go down into maybe the middle stream of the supply chain where we get into warehousing or manufacturing more than warehousing raw material. Maybe we're warehousing raw materials and the manufacturing process into kind of staging for distribution out to the end user. What does sustainability look like in that part of the supply chain?
Yeah, here within our own operations, we've been focused for a very long time. And I think here, what I would highlight is just pure conservation. If we look at our own operations, our own 12 breweries here in the U.S., over the last 10 years, we've reduced water use, for example, by 30% over 10 years. Energy, we've reduced 16% over 10 years. So amazing stats when it comes to just pure conservation. And we also have a high recycling rate internally. So our breweries have a 99.8% recycling rate on all the materials that they use coming into their operations. So when I think about where we've been historically with our public goals and our public commitments, we've always, if I look back the past 10 years, we've always had efficiency KPIs of our operations highlighted. And so those were our main goals. When I think about 10 years ago, we had water conservation, energy conservation, recycling, and greenhouse gas emission reduction. That was our focus inside our walls. And now what we've moved to and what we're really talking about today so much more is our supply chain. And all of our public goals right now, all four of those pillars we talked about, are stretching into our supply chain. So it's outside of our brewery walls. It's as far as we can impact with our scale and our operation. And we know that we have a duty to really do this, to really protect and incentivize and influence our entire supply chain.
Yeah, I think any other company out there or all other companies out there, a lot of the sustainable gains can be driven through efficiencies, right? Just general efficiencies make you're using less products, whether it's raw materials or there's not so much waste in your raw materials or your packaging. Just becoming more efficient drives a lot of sustainability in and of itself.
Absolutely, and it saves money. I mean, this is good business. It's just simple, good business and good economic business. To be frank, right? So it makes a lot of sense. And
How are you finding the reusable power markets over the last 10 years? Has that changed dramatically, or is that where has it really changed dramatically when you look at things in the middle stream?
yeah, so our renewable electricity goal, again, it's 100% renewable by 2025. Very, very happy to talk about this because we'll be meeting this goal next year. We have two very large utility scale virtual power arrangements with the utility and with the developer that is offsetting 100% of that conventional electricity that we use today. So we have a wind farm in Oklahoma, massive. To put it in scale, it's 152 megawatts of power that's been online since the beginning of 2018. So that represents about half of our needs here in the U.S. And then next year we have a solar farm starting up in the great state of Texas. Again, very large scale, 222 megawatts of power. And once this comes online mid-year 2021, essentially all of our brands here in the U.S. will be made with renewable electricity, which is amazing that we're going to be able to hit this goal early before 2025. And now we're looking towards what's next, what can we do next. in the supply chain.
Yeah, that is fantastic. Having the solar and wind power going through there. Let's get downstream into transportation and logistics and talk about that is where we really come into carbon emissions, I think, and saving on alternative fuels and there's some really great efficiencies in there. So let's talk about transportation and moving that beer around.
Yeah, one of my favorite topics. So our goal here is a zero emission fleet of the future. Transportation makes up about 9% of our carbon footprint. When we look at that total value chain carbon impact. So we're working here on a number of things, and we have, I think, a portfolio of solutions that ultimately we'll see in the future. So a number of partners that I could talk about. A couple that we've announced this year, we've had some traction with this year in real implementation and execution, is one with BYD. So you're probably familiar with BYD. We're working with them also in the state of California. We have 25 electric vehicles now in our wholesaler fleet. They are delivering to retail. So this is what we call like the tier 2 space. It would be Class 8 trucks, more in an urban setting delivery to retail again. So here, important, I would say, is partnership. So we worked with BYD, but Engie was involved with us on the infrastructure build. Of course, we worked with CARB in the state of California and also CTE, the Center for Technology and the Environment there. So a strong partnership, a lot of players involved in that success story. And then second thing I'll just highlight, we also had an announcement on this year for our use of renewable natural gas. So this is in St. Louis, Missouri, here, our hometown, my hometown, and also in Houston at our Houston brewery in Texas. And so we're working again. I want to highlight the partnerships here because it was a strong partnership with Agility on the fuel tank side and Peterbilt trucks, and we're working with U.S. Gain and American Natural Gas on the fueling station side. But we're able to convert about 180 of our dedicated fleet to renewable natural gas. And as you may know, that's about a 70% offset when you think of emissions related to conventional diesel. So again, an amazing story in our transportation space and how we're able to keep working towards that zero emission fleet of the future.
Yeah, it's amazing how big of strides that's come along. The carbon or the alternative fuels and those pieces. Where do you expect it to go over the next few years?
I think we're going to continue building out infrastructure. Certainly seeing more electric vehicles in our space coming on next year, and then we're really looking forward to piloting in the next couple of years with like Tesla and Nikola and different partners that we have in the long haul, longer over the road transportation space, where we see some other solutions coming into play before 2025.
Yeah, there's amazing things going along in that front. We've got a couple minutes left. Let's talk about some of the challenges of you mentioned and really early in our talk that holistic approach. Let's talk about some of the challenges and opportunities for that holistic approach to drive sustainability.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges we have is just getting our entire supply chain in a format that we can all come together, collaborate, and work together on these issues and really form solutions. And so what I would highlight there is we've started a program last year called Eclipse, and we've now come together with our second year with our suppliers in what we're calling an Activate program led by a third party, where we have working groups now with 30 plus of our suppliers that make up 2/3 of our carbon footprint in our supply chain. So we've got the right big players involved now, and we've got dedicated working streams to different solutions that we see coming forward in our supply chain. And we'll continue to do that over time. So I think the challenge just comes with getting everyone focused and committed, right? So focused and committed with goals so that you can actually measure progress. Because if you can't measure progress, you'll never be able to get to where you need to go.
True. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So you have to be able to measure it to manage it. And I think there's going to be some great strides going forward over the next 5 years in sustainability. I think it's just really picking up steam now. And Angie, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today here at the North American Supply Chain Summit. How does our audience reach out and learn more about Eclipse, so the program you just mentioned, AB InBev, and yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I would point first to our website, purposebeyondbrewing.com. So if you go there, you can find all of our holistic work on energy and environment and responsible consumption as well as economic impact. So there's a lot of resources there. I would also say just reach out to me on LinkedIn, of course, and happy to connect.
Thanks again for watching this fireside chat at the North American Supply Chain Summit, and stay tuned for great talks ahead.